Hello, we are with Sophie and Veld, MEP from Renew Europe Group in the European Parliament. Welcome, Sophie, and thank you for being here with us. Would you expect to be where you are today 6 months ago?
No, I don't think anybody had expected that because everybody was busy, immersed in Brexit talks and the British leaving and the multi-annual financial framework, and all of a sudden here we are in the middle of a kind of global lockdown, trying to figure out how we're going to deal with this situation. So I don't think anybody had expected it, but it also puts the European Union to the test. It puts parliamentary democracy and our freedom to the test, our European values. It's putting a lot of things to the test.
Do you think we are ready to manage all this extra pressure? Because if we isolate case by case previous COVID-19, every time there was a tension moment, would be at least 1 year to get out of it and to overcome it. And at this point, we face so many constraints, so many challenge threats at the same time. Do you think that we are up to this task?
Well, the interesting thing is that, the world doesn't ask if you're ready or not. We've already, over the last 2 decades or so, we have gone through many extremely rapid and profound changes. There's been a lot of disruption, and this is really the mega disruptor. And we'll just have to deal with it. These things happen in the course of history, and only in hindsight we will know whether we made all the right choices. So you cannot prepare for something of this magnitude, but obviously we live in a part of the world which is relatively well equipped to deal with this kind of shocks. But I think what people don't realize sufficiently well is that when they're talking about, we want to go back to normal, we're not going to go back to normal. There's going to be a new normal. And the question is, are we going to cope well enough with the new normal? Will we be prepared? For example, is Europe going to be united and strong enough in a new post-corona era where, it's not member states of the European Union competing with each other. It will be Europe competing with the United States, with China, with Brazil, with Russia. That's going to be the battle. And we see that the old-fashioned intergovernmental Europe, which is purely cooperation between member states, between government leaders, is simply not, it doesn't work anymore in the world of today, and even less in the world of tomorrow. And of course, we can see Putin, Trump and Xi, they are delighted if the European Union is divided. They want the internal market to hold together because they need the market. Of course. But otherwise, politically, they want us to be weak. So this is one of the big tests, and it's not a new question. This issue has been on the table for quite a few years already. So,
and there's been a massive investment by those actors, Russia and China, more specifically trying to destabilize politically the EU, separate some member states, causing more friction inside the Council. And the Council will be pivotal to overcome, or at least to lay down a roadmap to live with this crisis, because like you said, it will not go away like this, unfortunately. And even if tomorrow there will be a cure, and I'm not talking about a vaccine, it's a cure, it's a treatment, there will be no trust, because we all took hostage from this situation. And rebuild trust will take a long time.
Trust, the T word here is the key word in many, many, many respects. If you consider, for example, this is really strange, that some governments seem to distrust some of their fellow European governments more than they distrust the Russia of Putin or the United States of Donald Trump, which is strange. And I mean, I think we have some reason for self-confidence as Europeans. I mean, I'm not denying that this is a huge crisis. It's also a crisis of trust and a political crisis. But if you see where we're coming from, just look back over your shoulder where we came from. You know, the European integration was created on the rubble and blood of 2 world wars. We've had more wars on this continent since. We've had, you know, in Southern Europe and Eastern Europe, we've had decades of dictatorship, communist dictatorship, military dictatorship, and yet here we are, you know, still the most prosperous, the freest, the safest continent in the world. And how did we achieve that? By trusting each other. And, you know, did we have any reason to trust each other after the Second World War or after communist dictatorship? No, we didn't. But the fact that we did have that courage to reach out and, you know, and take that leap into the unknown together, that's what made us the best continent in the world. So I would like to remind people of this, that we have this strength as Europeans. We can do that. And it's scary, yeah, leaping into the unknown is always scary, but I'd rather leap together with all the Europeans and hold on to each other rather than letting Trump and Putin and Xi, you know, set us up against each other.
There is an ongoing discussion, and I think it's very important there is a discussion about this, where a lot of European citizens are a bit perplexed that the European Parliament was able to reach a commitment, a consensual position, how to tackle the immediate effects of this crisis. And they are very surprised that the Council is not there. No. How can we explain this to our citizens?
First of all, I'm not so sure that, you know, everybody can distinguish between the EU institutions, between Council, Parliament, and the European Commission. They think, you know, Brussels is just kind of blob, an EU blob. But I do think that the European Parliament is the arena where decisions can be taken. I mean, we always find a majority, we find compromises, we find consensus, and if there's no consensus, then we vote. Whereas in the Council, for many years now, they're unable to take any kind of decision, whether it's about the budget of the European Union, how to tackle the corona crisis, migration, the rule of law crisis, you name it. They're unable to agree on anything at all. And that is an image that many people see. And then I also think that, of course, the reporting is, you know, varies widely, to put it diplomatically, between the member states. I can tell you that in Netherlands, the reporting on issues like recovery bonds and mutualizing debt, it's toxic. It's really toxic, and I do blame national politicians, including in my own country, for feeding misconceptions, misunderstandings. I mean, they're always, you know, they pretend that they are the knights fighting against disinformation and fake news, but they're spreading a lot of fake news themselves. I mean, this whole caricature on both sides of the Netherlands and Italy, the Netherlands who are virtuous, industrious people who are saving their money, and now we have to pay for those lazy and deceitful Italians, whereas the other side is that the Italians call the Dutch and the Germans, they call them Nazis and vultures and whatever. I mean, it's all complete and utter nonsense. And if you think, I mean, to come back to what I said earlier, both the Netherlands and Italy were amongst the founding fathers of the European Union, and at the time that was a big gamble that they took. They did dare, you know, the Netherlands and Italy, to hold hands and take that big leap into the unknown. And look now, both of us have become more prosperous, more safe, and more free. So I think it is completely stupid to for national politicians to feed their people with prejudice and caricatures and distrust of the other. Anyway, to come back to Parliament, because that was the question. In Parliament, it is not about, of course, we all have a nationality and we all have a national background, but we are much more focused on finding majorities for solutions. Whereas in the Council, when member states or when prime ministers or government leaders arrive at the Council, they arrive with a briefcase full of red lines. That's all they think about. They only think about, how can I go home and tell my people that I have successfully defended the red lines. So they're not at all solution oriented. Whereas in European Parliament, we say, okay, we need to find a majority for a position, for a solution, and that's what we'll do. So it's a very different creature.
Yes, but at this point, we are not looking for a national victory. We are looking for a European victory.
Yes,
when talking about this crisis.
That's the whole point.
And do you think there is a commitment for that with the overwhelming majority of the member states?
No.
Everything is decided by unanimity, and it's a rule against a sound democracy.
No, it's actually the opposite. Many national politicians believe that they can score a victory by defeating other countries, so to say, in the European Union. So bashing the European Union and blocking consensus has become a campaign feature. They think it will give them electoral gains, but it's a stupid gamble, because they're gambling with the future of the European Union, and they don't seem to realize that the future of the European Union determines the future of all of us. Because it's very clear, I think, to me and to most people, that we need a strong European Union in these times. I mean, the virus doesn't know national borders or political parties, or the virus doesn't distinguish. It distinguishes between those who are well equipped to defend themselves against the pandemic and those who are weak, and vulnerable. And we are stronger together as a European Union. We are weaker if we are divided. So if we're weak, we have less tools to protect our people. How stupid is that?
You've been addressing publicly through a series of articles and interviews two specific situations. First, rule of law, and let's talk about Hungary on that point, but also potential tools that can help our different member states to control efficiently the spread of the pandemic. And we are talking about privacy, data privacy. I would like to have two comments on both of these fronts, because both of them are challenging. One basically is a late upgrade of an ongoing situation for already a few years. We are talking about Hungary, naturally. But if we talk about these potential apps to help the different member states to control, to monitor in a more efficient way the pandemic, also presents a few questions that should be addressed.
Well, both issues are they are about our European values, and just as a little reminder to the audience, they are the values that are laid down in Article 2 of the European treaties. And it is by far the most important article in the treaties. I mean, Article 1 is not the most important one because it just says, hello, everybody. And then there's Article 2. Article 2 is about democracy, the rule of law, and fundamental rights. And everything else, internal market, transport policies, fisheries, agriculture, all of that comes after Article 2. Article 2 is the core. That's what it's all about. And it's, if we don't all respect the same values, if we don't uphold the same standards when it comes to democracy, the rule of law, and fundamental rights, then the European Union cannot function. How can we share, for example, police information? How can we have a European arrest warrant? How can we have cross-border investment if we cannot rely on the independent judiciary in all the member states? So, the whole European Union is a community of values, and it's a community of law. And that community is as strong, it's a chain, and it's as strong as the weakest link. And therefore, the situation in Poland and Hungary is extremely, extremely worrying. And what is even more worrying is that, in Hungary in particular, it's been like this since the election of Orban in, 2009? Long time ago. And it's been deteriorating. And the European Commission and the European Council have just turned a blind eye, completely. Orban gets the protection from the very powerful EPP party, the Christian Democrats, which is an absolute disgrace. And we've gone to a point where the genie is so much out of the bottle that we don't know how to get it back in there. The other issue on the so-called contact tracing apps or Corona apps, that's one that's being debated very much. Our group Renew has proposed to have to put that on the agenda of the plenary session of the European Parliament, because clearly, I mean, what we see at the moment is that 27 member states are each developing and contracting their own app or apps. So we get a complete patchwork of apps, which is going to be an obstacle to freedom of movement. It's being sold to us now as saying, oh, if you just take this app and then you can be free to move again. That's not true, because if they're only national apps, then as soon as people go across borders, then the whole purpose is gone. So we are arguing very much for a European approach, because look at all the hundreds of millions of border crossings, every year. Not just tourists, but also people living in border areas, working across the border, people who have married someone in another member state, students, think about Erasmus, tourists, I mean, business travelers, all these cross-border movements cannot take place if we don't have some form of harmonized approach, at least. And then, of course, the question is also, I mean, I think these contact tracing apps can be a useful tool in the toolkit of the fight against the coronavirus, but it can never be the only tool. I mean, it's being sold a little bit as a panacea, saying, take the app and we don't need anything else anymore. That's of course not true, because it will be completely pointless if, for example, the uptake is insufficient. If only a very small part of the population will use the app, then it's pointless. If it is not accompanied by other measures like very strict social distancing, testing, the rapid development of vaccines, and what have you. And then, of course, we have to make sure that it meets all the, not just the privacy standards and data protection standards, but all the fundamental rights. Because imagine, even if, let's say, it's not going to be a mandatory app, so the government is not going to oblige you to use one. But what will happen if, for example, the school of your kid says, well, your kid can only enter the school if you have this app. If your local department store puts it as a precondition, your gym, the public transports, all these, your workplace, for example. So that's something we need to look into. We also want to make sure that the data are not going to be stored somewhere centrally in the cloud, accessible for governments who may think, oh, that's handy. There's this whole set of very personal data of all my citizens in the cloud. I want. So there's so many questions to be answered, and we shouldn't rush into this. We should look at it very seriously, but we have to make sure that it's absolutely watertight.
We are approaching the end of our talk. You're all pessimist or optimist are you when facing today's reality? Do you think that will take a long time to go back to full normality, or do you think that we will be able to achieve and to adapt to this temporary normality in a few months' time?
It's not about going back to normality. It's about whether or not we can adjust to the new normality. Will we do that? Yes, absolutely. The only question is, how long is it going to take? And that's a big question. We've had so many very profound changes in society, and people are getting a little bit dizzy. The world is spinning so fast. They say, I want to get off. Or they're looking for the pause button, but there is no pause button. So the only question is, can we adjust, and can we reassure a population which is already very insecure, feeling very insecure, and a population that has gone through, quite a string of substantial crises and disruptions, like the financial crisis, migration crisis, Brexit, terrorist attacks, the dismantling of the multilateral world order. I mean, all these things. So can people when people are insecure, they tend to you know, to close the windows and the doors rather, and they become distrustful. Whereas what we need now is trust.
Exactly.
Will we find the confidence and the self-confidence to, you know, I keep saying, this big leap into the unknown, or are we just going to close our eyes and you know, hope that it will all blow over, which it won't?
Well, we have a lot of false prophets around us, and that is also a liability. Would you like to advise who's listening and watching us any book, any movie that should take a couple of hours or a couple of days to read or watch?
If you've got nothing to do, you mean?
Well, there are no dinners or movie nights at this point, so.
No. Okay, here my all-time favorite movie is Life of Brian of Monty Python, which ends with this very famous song when you know, Brian is crucified, he's on the cross, and there's
always look at the bright side of life.
the right side of life. You know? I think yeah, okay. That's the one people should watch.
Sophie, thank you for being with us today, and stay safe.
My pleasure. Thank you. You too.